Hello, welcome to our presentation on Home of Our Own, a caring community and housing for all. The title of our presentation is Prairie House from Vision to Reality, Charting a Family-Led Path for Independence and Inclusivity.
I'm Wallitsch-Oemichen, one of the co-founders of Home of Our Own and the parent of a 28-year-old young lady with autism named Amy.
And I'm Susan Wallitsch, and I'm a parent of a 29-year-old young man named Frankie, who also has non-speaking autism.
So what you're seeing in front of you is Prairie House. And Prairie House is the labor of love that Susan and I were behind co-founding. And the reason you see a kitchen behind us is because we are actually physically sitting in Prairie House. And so you have a little flavor of one of the community rooms. But Prairie House, the name Prairie House, is a nod to the Swiss village where it is located, which is a rural community of 2,000, about a half hour south of Madison, Wisconsin. And the apartment building itself has 8 two-story townhomes, which are 3 bedrooms, and 22 other units, either 1 or 2 bedrooms, including 10 what we call garden apartment units that are fully handicapped or ADA accessible. Some of the features of the building that we will talk about in a little bit include things like a rooftop deck, fireplace area, multiple community rooms, outdoor courtyard, sensory equipment such as indoor and outdoor swings. Okay, so Prairie House, truly affordable housing. A little bit more about the actual units. Almost all of the units will be rented to or are rented to residents that have annual incomes at either 30, 50, 60, or 80% of the area, which is the county median income. There are also 2 market rate units, both of which are 2-bedroom units that rent for about $1,250 a month. All of the units, or virtually all of the units other than the market rate units, were designed to be affordable for people living off of Social Security or people who are in a living wage, typically hourly wage job. And the rents overall are going to range from $433 a month for a 1-bedroom unit to $1,250 a month for the 2-bedroom market rate units.
So how did Who start? About 9 years ago, there were a group of 4 families and a very devoted caregiver who sat down around my kitchen table, and we were preparing to discuss the issue that was weighing most heavily on our hearts, and that was what will happen to our adult sons and daughters with significant disabilities when we are no longer here or no longer able to care for them in our homes. And at that point, none of us had a good option for our sons or our daughters outside of care within our own homes with mom and dad or a very devoted caregiver taking care of everyone. So we started to think about if we could design the perfect situation for our loved ones, what would it be like? And we came up with the idea that we would love to have them in an inclusive apartment setting where they would not only be with one another, but they would also be surrounded by all kinds of people, by families with young children, by younger singles, with couples, with older people, with seniors who are still active. And so we envisioned a place that would be very inclusive, but would be very safe for them to live and would be a place where they could comfortably live throughout their adult years. And these are pictures of some of our loved ones. My son, Frank, is on the far left. There's Marianne's daughter, Amy, in the center. And there's one of our parents, Jane, with her daughter, Regina.
And I guess one of the things we'll mention is throughout our PowerPoint presentation, there are no stock photos of residents. They are all actually people who are living here right now or will be moving in shortly.
Yeah.
Okay. The need. The need started, as Susan said, with basically a cohesive, like-minded group of 5 families. And we began meeting weekly at a local coffee shop, and we began meeting weekly almost 9 years ago. And by word of mouth over time, others began to find out about our group, find out about us, and find out about what we were trying to do. And since the project began to really gain traction, state, national, local media found out, and we have been essentially barraged with press inquiries and, more importantly, with inquiries from family groups who understand the need, feel an urgency, and want to try to accomplish something similar in their own communities. Okay, so one of the things that we discovered, we began with the focus on people with disabilities, our sons and daughters. But what we discovered along the way was that there's a housing crisis, but not just for people with disabilities. There's a housing crisis for many population groups, senior citizens, working people earning an hourly wage, young families, singles, young couples, single parent families. And so everybody, or many people in that group, are really faced with, how do we live in a quality setting, a nice, as Susan said, a safe setting, but that is affordable. And due to COVID, that crisis has really laid bare, just how serious and urgent that issue is.
So as a group, we really started to think about not just our loved ones, but also the larger group of people who desperately needed housing. And it just seemed to make sense that if we could create something that met all of the needs, we might have a project that could really take off and be very, very appealing, not only to the community of New Glarus, where Prairie House is located, but could be appealing to many, many communities across the country where there's need for safe, affordable housing. So as a group, we started to talk about not so much what does the building look like, but what were our guiding principles? What were our non-negotiable pieces for this building that we felt we had to have in place to make it work? And the very first thing is many of our children have really significant challenges. And although there are other places across the country that are starting to provide some really interesting and exciting options for people with autism and other disabilities to live independently or semi-independently in an apartment, our loved ones would not qualify for those apartments. For example, if you were a non-speaking person and couldn't express your needs clearly, perhaps if you needed assistance with toileting or with personal cares, if you weren't able to manage your own cooking or your own meals, many, many places would not allow you to apply for an apartment. So our first principle is that ability is not a barrier. No matter what your challenges, no matter how significant they might be, we will have a place where you can live in your own apartment in this setting. Our second really important principle was that income level is no barrier. For many of our families, Social Security disability is the income level, and we wanted to make sure that the apartments were affordable for people living off of Social Security. The third principle was that we wanted a truly integrated apartment building, so people of all abilities, all ages, all backgrounds, family structures could live here, could get to know one another, and we could create a real neighborhood with real relationships and lots of natural supports flowing in all directions. We are both from rural communities. Our loved ones grew up in rural communities, and we wanted to keep our loved ones, if not in their own community, in a community similar to where they grew up and close to home. So the town that Prairie House is located in is about a little over 2,000 people, and it's within a 20-minute drive for most of the families who have their loved ones with special needs here. So most of the families that chose Prairie House for their loved one also came from rural communities close by. And our final and perhaps most important guiding principle for you is that we wanted to create something that was replicable, that families in other places could look at the template that we created and do something very, very similar in their own community, because we realized very, very quickly that really just about every community in the United States needs a place like this for special needs people and workforce people and active seniors to live in community together.
Which brings us directly to where to build. And so our starting point, as Susan said, was we wanted our loved ones, and we knew that they felt most comfortable in a rural setting. So we began the search for the actual parcel of land where Prairie House would be built. We already talked about the size of the community and its proximity to a major metropolitan area. The parcel that we located was 6 acres, which has since been divided into 2 3-acre parcels. And the fortunate thing was the parcel already had commercial zoning, which permitted multifamily in place, and already had sewer and water hookup in place. One of the nice things about the location, even though it's in a rural setting, it is within walking distance to grocery stores, banks, pharmacy, schools, a pool, parks, and other amenities, lots of restaurants in this community. And the final thing is, although we originally located the parcel, we had to give up some control to our developer, obviously, because they were going to be putting an option on the land and developing the project. And so ultimately it was the developer's final decision. And fortunately they agreed and loved the parcel that we had located. The developer. So our developer was Wisconsin Housing Preservation Corporation, which is a Wisconsin-based nonprofit that focuses on affordable housing. And so we were very lucky to partner with, first of all, a nonprofit, which was vision and mission driven, which was nice synergy with our own nonprofit. And also that nonprofit, WHPC, had quite a bit of experience with tax credit financing. And Prairie House is a project that was 85% or so financed by federal housing tax credits. One of the things we learned along the way in the search for the developer is that if at first you don't succeed, cut your losses and move on. So WHPC was not the first developer that we talked to. And I had talked to at least one other developer and just, discovered that sort of our visions didn't necessarily align, and that's okay. And so if you are part of a family group, you may discover that conversations with a developer don't feel right, or there's something that makes you uncomfortable as a group. It's okay to move on. And there are other developers that have this type of experience and that you can move on to.
The cost. Home of Our Own is our nonprofit that helped to raise funding for this project. And of course, Prairie House is the name of the apartment building. The total cost came in right around $9 million. As Marianne mentioned, about 85% of that was covered by tax credit financing, which our developer did the application for, but we did assist in some ways with that application. Our developer was also able to secure some federal home loan, bank loans, but the final piece of it was there's something called the gap in projects like this. And that's the financial difference between the financing that the developer can secure and what it will actually cost to complete the project and do the project well. So Home of Our Own, our little nonprofit, made the commitment that we would fill the gap. And our gap was $500,000, $500,000. And so we had 18 months to learn how to fundraise.
After we panicked.
After we panicked, then we got really serious about fundraising. We also worked with a lot of strategic partners to help us in the establish this project. You can see WHPC is on the screen. It's our developer, but we also worked with a local poverty project, Southwest CAP. We worked very closely with the village of New Glarus, where Prairie House is located, and United Way, became a great supporter. And then there were other community partners that we worked with as well.
Okay, the design. So when we talk to family groups, one of the things that we find is that many families tend to go straight to what they want the building to look like, how big they want the community rooms to be, what they want the outdoor spaces to look like. And we encourage family groups to back up right away. And rather than jump to the architecture and the aesthetics, is to first and foremost think about what population specifically are you trying to serve? And as Susan said, we had a very specific population. We do have a broad range of abilities in the building, but we had quite a few individuals, probably 8 to 10, who fall into that more challenged category. Either were in wheelchairs, needed handicapped accessibility,
Significant behaviors,
needed caregivers 24/7. And so we always tried to think about what do those people in particular need, and then let the design flow from that. So trust your developer with your vision, make sure they are clear on what your vision is, but realize that along the way, some compromises are going to be required. Okay.
Sure. You want to take this? Okay. Aggressive fundraising begins. Although Marianne and I have both previously been on boards and done some raising work before, we had never been in charge of fundraising or in charge of raising such a large amount of money in such a short time. So we both love this picture because it was our first fundraising event, and we were so excited, and we got to be on television, and it was just really, really fun. But very quickly from the fundraising activities, and a small amount of media coverage became national media coverage, which was really important and very, very helpful towards our fundraising activities. Once we could show that we had some coverage in the Washington Post and on national television with Soledad O'Brien and on National Public Radio, many organizations started to look at us really seriously and begin to discuss our fundraising needs with us. Yeah. And these are just some fun pictures from some of our fundraising. During COVID, we did an outdoor garage sale, which actually turned into an outdoor pop-up thrift store. We had so much stuff, but it was something we were able to do and do outside as a fundraiser. And these are just some lovely pictures from that. And we also did a fundraiser called 100 Extraordinary Women, where every woman who came to the fundraiser donated $1,000 to the project. And that was just incredibly fun and successful. And I think everyone felt so enriched by being part of that celebration.
All right, so where are we today? These are pictures of the completed building from the front and then also from the rear. And we had our groundbreaking in December of 2019. And we, as part of that process, when we still were in fundraising mode, still needed to raise our $500,000, we are doing our groundbreaking in the midst of COVID. So that basically upended our entire fundraising initiatives, and we had to really switch it up. And we aren't sure exactly how we did it, but we somehow managed to still raise our $500,000 despite COVID. During that time, we continued to work with our partners, our strategic partners, including the construction contractors, and we continue to do so to this day. And what has wound up happening since Prairie House has been completed is we are shifting to activities focus. So envisioning what we will be able to do post-COVID, but our role has also shifted in a way to being a liaison between the owners and us, between the owners and property management and service providers. So we've all had to start working together, and we help facilitate some of the conversations that have to occur as a result.
This gives you just a little timeline. Groundbreaking was December 9th, 2019. And pretty much a year to the day, the building opened and residents started moving in. And And Marianne covered some of our fundraising issues with COVID, which was very interesting. But now the building is almost completely full. All of our specially equipped ADA accessible units are full, and many of the residents have been living here for close to 4 months now. And our experiences, the two of us as parents, but also with not only our two loved ones, but also with all of the other parents who had their adult sons and daughters moved into the building, is transition went incredibly well. Many of the challenges and difficulties that we anticipated with our loved ones moving away from home and into their own apartments just didn't happen. And I would say to a person, we would all say that our sons and daughters are now much happier living in their own apartment, having their own space, and having more independence from their mom and dad.
And these are just some of the pictures of our indoor and outdoor spaces, including a courtyard, and then our indoor spaces, which we hope soon will have, be full and have all sorts of joyful activities.
And the space you see in the middle, the kitchen, is where we're sitting right now recording this presentation. And it was specially designed so that we could have teaching opportunities in the kitchen for some of our residents here in the building, both those with special needs who may need some rudimentary teaching skills taught, but also anyone who lives in the building who might enjoy a cooking class of some sort. So we're really excited about that. Our service providers, I'm sure that as parents of sons and daughters with special needs, one of your biggest questions is who takes care of your folks day to day and make sure that their needs are met, their meals are cooked, they're getting appropriate personal care, and they're supervised when they need supervision. What we did early on is we contacted some of the local service providers in our area and got to know them. And there was one in particular that we just felt really solid with. We felt like their mission meshed with ours, that they were very trustworthy, that they had very high standards of care, and just that they were hiring wonderful people. And so we asked if they would come on board and make a commitment to provide support to anyone with special needs who lives at Prairie House if that individual requests support. So most, but not all, of our adults with disabilities in Prairie House receive service from Best Life, which is our service provider, but everyone is free to choose. And if folks want to have their cares provided by another organization or by family members, that's just fine too. Here in Wisconsin, we have a self-directed program so that people are able to choose who they would like to provide their cares and their long-term support.
All right, so to recap, what are our biggest lessons learned? Our main one is to start out with a like-minded group of people. Mm-hmm. And our group did not start this big. Mm-hmm. It started with just a handful of families, and that's okay. And it's going to take time, but join with a group of people who have a similar vision and mission, and you will undergo and take a lot of baby steps, which may feel like baby steps, but those baby steps add up over time. Mm-hmm. Don't get ahead of your skis. Take the time to do the hard work at each stage, and there will be a lot of it. But take those steps, spend a lot of time learning. I think if we had to characterize our first 2 years for sure, mm-hmm. is we spend an awful lot of time doing research, learning, really thinking about what models were out there that we liked, what models were out there that we didn't like, and then extrapolating that information to our group, and then saying, how does that translate into something that fits the needs of the individuals that we're representing? And again, and we can't say this often enough, never forget your target population and what they need and want. And this is my daughter, Amy, in her apartment, who is pictured doing some things that she never did at home, never showed much interest in doing. And most of the time, she has a smile on her face the way she does in the middle picture, which is when she was looking out her window at the lights of town and having her own little dance party. And never, never, ever give up. You can do it too.
Yeah. I think we learned that we can do the hard things. We just have to do them one at a time, one step at a time. So this was our presentation, and we are happy to answer any questions that you might have.